Om Namo Narayana, welcome back as we read through Adi Shankara. Today is the first of two videos where we read through the Atma Bodha. I don't know anything about what we're about to read other than drawing on what I can guess from previous readings here. I am composing the Atma Bodha, this treatise of the knowledge of the self, for those who have purified themselves by austerities and are peaceful in heart and calm, who are free from cravings and are desirous of liberation. Just as the fire is the direct cause for cooking, so without knowledge no emancipation can be had. Compared with all other forms of discipline, knowledge of the self is the one direct means for liberation. Action cannot destroy ignorance, for it is not in conflict with or opposed to ignorance. Knowledge does verily destroy ignorance, as light destroys deep darkness. The soul appears to be finite because of ignorance. When ignorance is destroyed, the self which does not admit of any multiplicity truly reveals itself by itself, like the sun when the clouds pass away. Constant practice of knowledge purifies the soul, stained by ignorance, and then disappears itself, as the powder of the kataka nut settles down after it has cleansed the muddy water. The world, which is full of attachments, aversions, etc., is like a dream. It appears to be real as long as it continues, but appears to be unreal when one is awake, that being, when one's true wisdom dawns. The Jagat appears to be true, so long as Brahma, the substratum, the basis of all this creation, is not realized. It is like the illusion of silver in the mother of pearl. Like bubbles in the water, the worlds rise, exist, and dissolve in the Supreme Self, which is the material cause and the prop of everything. All the manifested world of things and beings are projected by imagination upon the substratum, which is the eternal all-pervading Vishnu, whose nature is existence intelligence, just as the different ornaments are all made out of the same gold. The all-pervading Akasha appears to be diverse on account of its association with various conditionings which are different from each other. Space becomes one on the destruction of these limiting adjuncts. So also, the omnipresent truth appears to be diverse on account of its association with the various conditionings and becomes one on the destruction of these conditionings. Because of its association with different conditionings, such ideas as caste, color, and position are superimposed upon the Atman, such as flavor, color, etc., are superimposed on water. Determined for each individual by his own past actions and made up of the five elements that have gone through the process of fivefold self-division and mutual combination, are born the gross body, the medium through which pleasure and pain are experienced, the tent of experiences. The five pranas, the 10 organs, and the manas and the buddhi form from the rudimentary elements before their fivefold division and mutual combination with one another, and this is the subtle body, instruments of experience of the individual. Avidya, which is indescribable and beginningless, is the causal body. Know for certain that the Atman is other than these three conditioned bodies. In its identification with the five sheets, the immaculate Atman appears to have borrowed their qualities upon itself, as in the case of a crystal which appears to gather unto itself color of its vicinity. Through discriminative self-analysis and logical thinking, one should separate the pure self within from the sheaths, as one separates the rice from the husk, etc., that are covering it. The Atman does not shine in everything, although he is all-pervading. He is manifest only in an inner equipment, the intellect, just as reflection in a clean mirror. One should understand that the Atman is always like the king, distinct from the body, senses, mind, and intellect, of which constitute the matter, and is the witness of their functions. The moon appears to be running when the clouds move in the sky. Likewise, to the non-discriminating person, the Atman appears to be active when it is observed the functions of the sense organs. Depending upon the energy of vitality of consciousness, The body, senses, mind, and intellect engage themselves in their respective activities, just as men work, depending upon the light of the sun. Fools, because they lack in their powers of discrimination, superimpose on the Atman, the absolute existence knowledge, all the varied functions of the body and the senses, just as they attribute blue color and the like to the sky. The tremblings that belong to the water are attributed through ignorance to the reflective moon dancing on it. Likewise, agency of action, of enjoyment, and of other limitations, which really belong to the mind, are delusively understood as the true nature of the Atman. Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are perceived to exist so long as the mind functions. They are not perceived in deep sleep when the mind ceases to exist. Therefore, they belong to the mind alone and not to the Atman. Just as luminosity is the nature of the sun, coolness of water, and heat of fire, so too the nature of the Atman is eternity, purity, reality, consciousness, and bliss. By the indiscriminate blending of the two, the existence-knowledge aspect of the self and the thought wave of the intellect, there arises the notion of I know. Atman never does anything, and the intellect of its own accord has no capacity to experience I know. But the individuality in us delusorily thinks he himself the seer and the knower. Just as the person who regards a rope as a snake is overcome by fear, so also one considering oneself as the ego is overcome by fear. The egocentric individuality in us regains fearlessness by realizing that it is not a Shiva, but is itself the Supreme Soul. Just as a lamp illuminates a jar or a pot, so also the Atman illuminates the mind and the sense organs, etc. These material objects by themselves cannot illuminate themselves because they are inert. A lighted lamp does not need another lamp to illuminate its light. So too, Atman, which is knowledge itself, needs no other knowledge to know it. By a process of negation of the conditionings through the help of the scriptural statement, it is not this, it is not this, the oneness of the individual soul and the Supreme Self, as indicated by the great Mahavayakyas, has to be realized. The body, etc., up to the causal body, ignorance, which are objects perceived, are as perishable as bubbles. Realize through discrimination that I am the pure Brahman, ever completely separate from all these. I am no other than the body, and so I am free from changes such as birth, wrinkling, senility, death, etc. I have nothing to do with the sense objects such as sound and taste, for I am without the sense organs. I am other than the mind, and hence I am free from sorrow, attachment, malice, and fear, for he is without breath and without mind, pure, etc., is the commandment of the great scripture, the Upanishads. I am without attributes and actions, eternal, without any desire and thought, without any dirt, without any change, without form, and ever liberated, ever pure. We're going to pause here. That's verse 34. So, just a side note, mention the commandment of the great scripture, the Upanishads. I have read so far on this channel some of the Upanishads, about a fourth of them actually. By the time you view this video, I may have done many more. My goal is to do all 108. So please check out my playlist for the Upanishads, and you can just search my channel for those. So, beyond that selfless plug of other videos here you might be interested in, or where to find that commandment, which is said here as the commandment of the Upanishads, but let's be honest, there's 108 of them, and if you have read them, or you've read them with me here, you'll know that they're not all completely unified. They come from different belief systems. So some may say that, others may not. Which is where we get into the idea of, oh, well, Hinduism is full of contradictions. I'm not going to go there. I'm simply going to quote my teacher, Sri Acharyji, who says, no, there is not contradictions. There appears to be on the surface. One book says one thing, one book says something else, but you'll find a third book that will bridge them. And quite often what you'll actually find is one book is describing one side of the mug. It says Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, The other book, though, gives you a picture of Mr. Rogers and Daniel Kett. I really like Mr. Rogers. And that's what this Upanishad describes. These seem like two different things, but in reality, it's the same mug. So it's describing one thing from two different points of view. It isn't really describing two different things. I just happen to have my mug sitting here, so it seemed like a legit. Hopefully you got what I got the example. So Atma Bodha here is discussing straight off. It says, I am composing the Atma Bodha, this treatise of the knowledge of self. The knowledge of self. And then it goes on, so without knowledge, no emancipation can be had. Compared with other forms of discipline, knowledge of the self is the one direct means for liberation. Verses 1 and 2 here. Yeah, I think that's true. If you don't know yourself, how can you know God? Self-awareness might be, I think, one of the greatest things we have in this world, and yet the most difficult thing, and maybe not that common. There was a news thing I was watching the other day on climate change, and this girl was being ridiculed for not being self-aware because she goes, yeah, no one should fly in airplanes without strict permission. You shouldn't just take trips. This shouldn't. And she was going on and on how airplanes destroy the climate, etc., etc. And then the host said, well, when was the last time you took an airplane trip? And she goes, oh, last week. My family forced me to go on vacation to, I don't know, the Bahamas or whatever, I forget now. And it was like, really? So you don't want anyone to ride airplanes, but you just went on one last week, and you're old enough to have stayed home alone too? And it was like this sense of the argument didn't quite fit. Or there was a politician some months back who was flying around on a private jet going, yeah, you should not fly on private jets, basically. But it's okay if I do it. And it was like, you're not really setting a good example here. The sense of self-awareness it's a little off. And I really think that this is something in society that is really hard to do. We get caught up in agendas, ideas, illusions, like this essay says, and we lose knowledge of the self. Okay, let me rephrase this. You don't think that knowledge of the self is that big of a deal, you may be thinking to yourself. Think about how many religions and spiritual practices are out there. And I'm not talking about traditional things like Sanatana Dharma or Buddhism or Islam or Christianity, New Age stuff. I swear every decade there's a New Age thing. You can read this, you can understand that, you can converse with beings this way. There's all these things, and some of them sound very legit, some of them sound very wonky. It's the spectrum of, human creation is out there. Well, if knowledge of the self wasn't that big of a deal, why would we have so many of these things developing? Because what is the point of religion? Well, knowledge of the self. Essentially, it's to find ourselves. Also, it's to find God. But we think that if we find God, we will know ourselves better. That discovery will do something to us. That's the idea. But let's move beyond religious. Have you ever been in the bookstore or Amazon or wherever and seen the self-help section? It's probably, actually I'm thinking about my bookstore locally, it's actually bigger than my religious section. My religious section is nothing. And they stick the Hindu books next to the Muslim books, and it's just all kind of a mess. No one cares. But the self-help section is like massive, and it can help you with anything you want, from dating to dieting to, I don't know, just choose a letter of the alphabet. It's probably something. There's some book dedicated to it, and then that sort of elbows into the world of philosophy and understanding things and learning stuff. And it's like, what is this? This is all knowledge of the self. Now, I do think that there are some forms of knowledge of the self which don't actually get you there. They don't teach you anything. I think actually they reinforce bad habits. They reinforce your own narcissism. And some things just are not about discovery. They're about subscribing to a something being sold by somebody to help somebody get rich, because they think being rich will make them smarter. But it's interesting because here is Adi Shankara writing somewhere between the years of 700 and 750 CE or BCE, whichever one you prefer. But that's 2,700 years ago from where I stand. Actually, it's over 2,700, or give or take, whatever, but close to it. And he's basically writing something which today is an industry. It's so interesting. He's writing something which is so true today. So absolutely true. It's like, I don't even question what he's writing. We've created a world around knowledge of the self. There's a lot of other things here I could have commented on, but that seems to be like the base idea. We will pick up with verse 35 in the next video and finish out the rest of the Atma Bodha. Feel free to comment down below on anything though, not just what I've been rambling about after the fact. And I'll catch you in the next video. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.